Hi everyone and welcome to a new video on the CBI channel. In this tutorial series we're creating a full stack web application with Python Django in the backend and React.js in the frontend. And in the end it's going to look something like this, where we have a nice looking user interface with a navigation menu and items on the homepage in the table, but also the option to create records, to edit records, and also to delete records. Now, this is not the first video in this series. In fact, we've already done 7 before, in which we've completed the initial setup of the Django backend and a React.js frontend. We've already enabled page navigation and created a nice looking navigation menu, and we created database models APIs and worked on getting the data to our frontend. Now in this video we're going to continue and we're going to be adding forms from Material UI to our project. And that step is going to bring us a little bit closer to enabling the create functionality inside of our React.js frontend and our Django backend. And that means that after this video our project will look like this, where our create page has some nice applied styling, and also we already have all of the different forms on the page, including the options for the select and multi-select forms. Now, to realize this, we are going to be following 5 steps. We're going to start by adding some basic style elements to our create page. Then we're going to be adding some forms for Material UI to our project, and we're going to be making sure that these forms are actually reusable by adding some parameters. Then we will add these forms to our create page and then change the parameters so that the forms are exactly what we need. So let's get started with the first step, which is adding some basic styling to the create page. Because right now, if we go to the front end and then to the source folder, components, and then create.jsx, you can see that all we've done in the previous video is get some APIs, so we have some data on the page. But what we return is still only a simple line of text, which states this is the create page. And if we open a terminal and we cd into the front end and then do npm run dev, and we can also start the backend server by cding into the backend, doing venv /scripts /activate to start the virtual environment, and then do python manage.py run server. And if we now go to the actual front end and we go to the create page, you can see that all that we have currently is this is the create page. But what we want to have at the end of this video is have a nice looking top bar which explains what this page is doing, and then also a nice looking area with the forms that we need to submit data to the backend. So let's start by going to our code and create a nice looking top bar on the top. So we're now inside of the code, and on the create.jsx page, we're going to go to the return statement, and I'm going to get rid of this is the create page text. Now in here, I want to create some boxes for Material UI with some nice looking styling. But first on the top, we need to import that. So we're going to be importing, and then we do box, and that is going to be from @mui/material. And now in the return statement, we can use a box, which is essentially the same as using a div. And inside of that box, we want to have a nice looking text. Now, the objective of the create page is to create different football clubs, because that is what our application is going to be about. So in here, we state create a new club. Now this essentially does exactly the same as before because we've not applied any styling. So let's use CSS to make sure that we have a nice looking bar here. So in the box here, I can add something called class name. And in here, we can say that this is going to be called top bar. And let's save that. And now when we go back to our application and we do inspect, and we select the area where our box is actually at, you will see that it now reflects and recognizes this as top bar. And we can use that to apply styling. So now we can go to the app.css file, because this app.css file is being applied on the total app.jsx, which means that whatever we do in there is getting applied to our project. And in there, we can now use it to style the top bar. So what we will do is I'm going to do dot top bar. And first of all, we say that we want to have display as flex, which is going to make it a little bit better and a bit more responsive. Then we can also state that we want to add a background color. And this background color is going to be something bluish. And I actually already know what the code for this should be, and it's RGB. And then we do 1, 1, and then 75. And that should be a bluish color. Now, of course, you can pick whatever you want, or you can even drag and drop this thing right here to get exactly the color that you would like. Now, it's nice that the background color is dark blue, but then I want the color of the text to be white. So we're going to set color equal to white. And what I also want is to align all of the items in the center so that it's spaced nicely vertically. And then as a last step, I'm also going to add a little bit of a margin bottom because I don't want the area underneath our top bar to be directly on top of that bar. So we make 20 pixels so that there's a little bit of room underneath that bar. And let's now save this. Okay, so when we now return, we see a nice looking bar right here, but I think that this is a little bit too crowded because the top and the bottom are very close to the text. So what we can do here is add something called padding, and let's set that to 10 pixels so that there's a little bit more space on the top and the bottom within that actual block. And actually, we don't need to put it within these parentheses. We just need to do 10px like this. And now you can see that it's a little bit more spacious. So we have this bar now already. Now, what I would also like is to start this part on the top left with an icon. So I want to have first an icon and then this text of create a new club. Now, what you remember from the previous video is that we can select icons from Material UI. So if we just go to this link right here, which is /material icons, you can also search for it on the top here. Then we are able to look up a certain icon. Now we're looking for something that indicates that we want to create something. So we are going to do this. And I actually like this one right here. So let's click on it and let's copy this one to our project. So now inside of our project, we're going to go to the create.jsx page. And in there, we paste in the add box icon. And we're going to be using that, and let's just place that right here before the text. And now it looks like this, but it's not really aligned that nicely. So let's try to figure out why that is happening. And actually what we can do is put this text into another block as well. So we're going to go to the top real quick of the create page. And in there, next to the box, we're also going to be importing something called typography. And now we're going to be putting this text inside of a typography block. And typography block is simply something for Material UI where you can place text in. So it's kind of like a p tag, but then for Material UI. And now we see that things are actually underneath each other. And the reason for that is that in the app.css file, I'll actually put flex in these parentheses, but it should be just flex. And when we now return, it looks quite okay. So a few things that I can add right here to make this look even a little bit better. And that is by adding some styling to the typography. And I can even show you how you can do this without CSS as well. You can do SX and then an equal sign and then double times these brackets. And then in here, we can actually define exactly the same stuff. So I can say margin left and set that to 15px. And let's save that. And now you can see that the margin between these two is a little bit more. And we can also do something like the font weight. So we can say font weight, and that is going to be equal to bold. And that is going to make sure that this pops out a little bit more than before. And then as a last thing, you can even within typography just say a variant, because there are variants within Material UI. And then I can say that I want to have subtitle 2, for example. And if I now save that, you can see that it slightly changes in the sizing. And also if I would do subtitle 1, it would be even bigger. But for now, I'm just going to do subtitle 2. So these are some of the typical ways that you can apply styling. Now my preference is always using CSS because it's a little bit more reusable than this, but this is also quite a nice way to apply it. Okay, now that we have this top bar ready, I also want to have a box right here where we can enter our forms. So what I will do is I'm going to, underneath this initial first box, state a second box. And I'm again going to do a class name, and that is going to be equal to the form box. And let's save that. And now inside of our app.css, we're also going to be adding something for form box. Now for this form box, I want to do several things. First of all, I want to set the width to 100%, so that is the full width of the entire screen. Then I'm going to be adding some padding, and what you also remember from this top bar is that it's going to allow some space within the box itself, so that it's not pressed against the borders. I'm going to set that to 15 pixels, and I'm even again making a mistake. I don't need to put these parentheses here. It can be like this. And also here I'm going to do some margin bottom, and let's again do 20 pixels. Now the first thing that we're going to be doing within this form box is define the width. I'm going to set the width to 100% so that it's always full width. And again here we're going to do display is equal to flex, just to make sure that it's a little bit more responsive. Now what I would like the items within this form box to do is space itself evenly across the width. So I'm going to set the justify content equal to space evenly. And that is going to make sure that if we have 3 different boxes, it's going to divide them evenly over the space. Now, right now, we don't really see anything happening right here. So what I will do is add some box shadow, just so we have some kind of a shading around it. Now, I've already defined this previously, so I'm going to do RGBA, and I'm going to set this to 100, 100, 111, and then 0.2. And then after this, we can do 0 pixels, 7 pixels, 29 pixels, and 0 pixels. Now let's save that. Now this tells us something about the color of the box shadow, and this tells us a little bit about where it is being applied more dominantly. Now just to show you the result, I'm also going to give a min height, and let's do a min height of 100 pixels so that we always see something there. And now you can see that we have this box below the box on the top. And in here, I want to have the different forms. Now to illustrate how that is going to work, we can already do something there. So inside of this create.jsx file, we have this form box. And within those form boxes, I want to have form areas. So I'm going to be creating a box and give it again a class name. And this is going to be equal to the form area. And actually, we're going to be having 3 different forms within one of these things. So let's just do it like this. And then we can also define some styling for the form area. So if we go to app.css again, I can do .form area. And we're going to state that each of these boxes is going to have a width of 33%, because that is 1/3 almost of the full width. And also here, I'm going to set a padding equal to 15 pixels, just to have some additional space. And we also will have a margin bottom here. And that margin bottom is going to be 20 pixels. And if we now save it and we go to the page here, we don't actually see anything right now. But if I open up this div, you can see that it is divided in different areas. This, and this. So that seems to be working just fine. And later on, when we have the forms, we can place them in here and see what it looks like. Now that brings us to the very important part of this, because we currently don't have any forms on our page. So let's change that. Now we're going to get the forms from Material UI. Because if we go to the documentation, to the components, you can see that there are all different kinds of things that we can select, including, for example, text fields, but also some select fields and even some multi-select fields. Now if we go to the backend and then to our model, you can see that the thing that we want to create in the end is a football club with a name, a description, attendance, a city, a country, and then a league characteristics. Now the purpose of this video is to show what is possible with React. So we're going to be trying out some different kinds of forms. So some of these forms, such as the name, but I'm also going to do the city and the attendance. I'm going to set that as just simple text forms. For the description, I might want to have a little bit of a bigger area where we can add some bigger text. So that's going to be a very big text field. And for the country and the league, I'm going to use a select form. And for the characteristics, we want to have a multi-select form because it is many to many. So let's go to the Material UI documentation and get forms for each of these scenarios. And the first one can be the text field. And when we get to this page, you can already see that it has quite some basic examples right here. Such as the outlined one, the filled one, and the standard one. Now I'm actually okay with using this standard one right here. So let's make sure that we have that inside of our project. So I'm going to expand this code and we're going to make sure that it's on JavaScript. And then I'm going to copy everything that is in here and we're going to add that to our project. Now inside of our code, let's just close the backend for a while and we can go into components and add in a new folder called forms. And in there, I'm going to define all of the forms that we will have. Inside of this forms folder, I'm going to add a new file and that file is going to be called textform.jsx. And in there, we can paste the full code from Material UI. Now, the first thing that I want to change is this right here, because I'm going to be calling this text form. And let's save that. And we can also just get rid of the first two examples because we are going to use the first one that we saw. And right now it's in some kind of a box, but I don't really need that. So I'm going to get rid of the box on the top and also get rid of the box right here. And we can also get rid of box right here. Now, this text field at the moment is quite basic. We have some props for an ID, and then we have a label and also a variant. Now, of course, I want to define the label for each of the forms differently. Because if I use this text form for a name, then I want the label to say name. But if I use it for city, then I want it to have city. So to make sure that we can use the code in this file in more than one instance, we can add some parameters. So what we're going to be doing now is add some parameters for label. And label represents the name that you see right here. So in this case, it's standard. Now to make sure that we can use that more often, we can simply say that this one is going to be equal to a parameter, which is going to be called label. And then on the top of the function right here, we can also add some squirrely brackets and say that this text form, if we use it anywhere else, we expect it to provide a parameter for label. And let's save that. Now to quickly see what that looks like, we can already make some changes to our create page. So we can go to our create page and on the top, we want to import the form that we just created. And we say import the text form from forms and then text form. Now inside of our models.py file, the first field that we have is name. So let's make sure that we have that as the first one as well on our create page. So inside of the box of form area right here, so the first one, we can simply say that we want to have the text form. And let's also close that off. But this text form needs a parameter. So we need to add something called label, because that is also what we define here. And then we can say that label in this case is going to be equal to club name, because we want this label to reference to the club name. And this is also the name the user will see. So specifying club name makes most sense. And if we now go to the page, you can see that we indeed have club name right here. And it works the same as on the documentation. However, I don't really like the way that it's placed at the moment. So let's quickly apply some styling. So I'm going to go to the text form.jsx. And in here, I'm going to state that we want to have sx and then an equal sign and then double square brackets. And I'm going to set the width of this form equal to 100%. And if we now go to the page, you can see that the width is not really 100%. So let's see what is up with that. And when we go to the create page, I noticed that I've not written class name correctly. So let's make the name of class name a capital. And let's also do that for the other ones. And now hopefully this should make sure that it's all nice. And indeed, we now see the name as the full width right there. Now, actually, if I take a look at it, I like the outlined version a little bit better than the standard. And it's quite easy to change that because we can simply say that the variant needs to be equal to outlined. So if I now copy over the outlined version and I go to my text form, I can just put that as the variant right here and get rid of the variant of standard, and that should make it outline. And you can see that here that it works just fine. Now I would actually also like a text field for the field of city, so we can already put that in here as well. And we don't need to do anything but just copy over this one, paste it inside of the next box, and then just call this field city instead of what we have as the club name. And if we now go back, we see that city is right there. And that shows you how easy it is to use reusable forms in Material UI. Now for the field of league and also for country, I would like to use select fields. Now that is something else inside of the material UI documentation, and you can find that under select. And we're going to be using this basic select example right here. So we're going to be expanding this code, and I'm just going to copy that over again to our project. So inside of the forms folder, we can create a new file and call that selectform.jsx. And then we paste it, and we again change the title right here to not basic select, but to the select form. Now the same thing goes here as for the text form. We're going to be making some changes with some parameters to make sure that we can get it exactly the way that we would like. So the first thing right here again is that we see that we have a hard-coded value for the label. And that is mentioned both here, but also here. So let's change that and make sure that age is equal to label, and also do that right here because it's actually specified in two places. And then we can go to the top and inside of select form mention with some parentheses that we expect the parameter of label. Now another thing that you notice is that it has already some options in here for the ages, and the options are currently hard-coded as 10, 20 and 30. However, if this is going to be one of the forms that we'll be using, we also want to pass in what the actual options are going to be. Now, changing this is actually quite easy. We can say that we expect the person using this form to provide some options. And then we can say that we want to map over those different options and provide an option for each of them. So I'm going to get rid of these first two options right here. And in here, we're going to define that we want to go over the options. So we do options.map. And then we do 2 times some round brackets. And inside of this second one, we do option. And after that, we can do an arrow function with, again, some round brackets. And now in there, we can put the menu item. And now for each of the options is going to map over it, and it's going to generate a menu item. Now, of course, we don't want to have a hard-coded value of 30 or the text of 30. We actually want to provide something else. And in the previous video, we have already created some APIs here that fetches some data. And if we go to the models, you will notice that for all of these combinations, it always has the name in each of these. So if we want to have the country as a pick field, we can use name, but as the same goes for league and for characteristics. So we can say inside of this menu item that we always want to see the option.name because we always want to have the name field there. Now, when we start communicating with our Django backend, it wants to receive the ID of the option that we select. So we can also say that we want to have option.id as the value. And by doing that, it's automatically going to work for all of our models. So let's now save this. Now, some other thing we also need to put in here is again the width. What I'm going to do is actually delete this box right here in the return statement. And let's save that. And the form control is actually already full width, so that should hopefully work. So let's now use this as an example for one of our fields. So we're going to go to our create page. And in there, we say that we want to import our select form. And if we go down, we can now create a select form for league. So in there, we can define that we have a select form. And as the parameters, we need to first provide a label. And the label is going to be league. But now we also need to provide the options. Now, if we go to the current create page and we inspect it, you will notice that we are already loading data for league because that's what we did in the previous video. And it has an ID and a name. And that is exactly the same as what we had inside of our select form, which also expects an ID and a name. So if we just put in the league that we have right here as the options, that should work. So I'm going to set options equal to league because that's where we stored that data. And let's save that. And now we see a new form. And if I click it open, we already have the options of the different leagues of our database. So that seems to be working just fine. Now, next to the league, we also would like to have country as a select field, which is listed right here. So we can also add that one to the create.jsx page with the exact same logic. So in here, we just say that we have, again, a form area, and we say that the label is going to be equal to the country. And then also the options are already specified in the data that we fetched, which is equal to country. So let's also add country. And let's save that. And now you can see that we have a fourth form right here, which displays all of the countries. Now, the thing that you also notice is that it actually just shows a fourth form right here. But actually, I would like this to be right here on the bottom. Now, to solve this, we can actually add something to the CSS to resolve it. So into the app.css file, we can go to the form box, and in there we can add something called flex wrap. And we can set that to wrap. And now when we go back, you can see that it actually shifts the country to the next row. So that seems to be working just fine. Now, country is not the last field that we needed. We actually also need attendance in here. And attendance, again, I'm just going to make that a text field. So that's quite convenient for us because we can just go to the create.jsx file and copy over one of those text forms and simply say that the attendance, which is inside of our model, is also going to be inside of the front end. Now, of course, right now it looks a little bit weird because it goes for space evenly and we only have these two fields here. But hold on, because we will add more. Because the next thing that we would also like inside of here is a multi-select field for the characteristics. Because many clubs can have many characteristics. So if we go to the material UI documentation and we scroll down, you see that there are multiple options for handling multi-select fields. So right here under multiple select, we can have a default option which works like this. We can have something with check marks, and we can also have this variant with chips. Now I actually really like this one, so I'm going to go for the chip variant. So similar as before, we can open the full code and copy it all. And inside of our projects, we're going to go to the forms, and then we go in here and add a new file for multi-select form.jsx. And again, we paste in everything and we set the name to multi-select form. Now, of course, similar as before, we will add some parameters in here. And this is going to be quite similar as what we did with the select form. So we can already state in here that what we want to add is a label and also the options. Now the label is actually needed right here. So we can add label instead of the chip that was there before. And it's also right here. So we can say that this one also needs to be equal to label. Now, the options is actually a little bit more difficult to do because you can currently see that what it does, it is going to map over names. And the name part is going to then determine what is being shown in these selected areas. So what we will do is say that names is going to be replaced by options. So because we want to map over the options that we have. And each of these is going to be called option. And as the key that we have, we want to have the ID. So that's going to be equal to option.id. And the value is also going to be the option.id because as explained, we want to have the ID of the model as the option inside of our database. And then as the actual value that is being displayed to the user inside of that chip, we want to have the option.name because we always want to have the name field visible to the user. Now, of course, we then also need to make a change to this selected part right here, because what it does right now is that it's going to create a key based on the value. And that is still okay, because that is just going to make sure that we have the option.id. But then it is going to also populate the label of that chip. And the chip is actually the gray thing that shows up here. And in there, we want to see the actual name of whatever is inside of our database. Now, I tried this in different ways, but for me, the best way to do it is simply go again and look inside of the list of the options. So we do options.find, and we want to show it where option is option.id equal to the value. And if that is the case, then we want to display the name. So we do .name. So what this will do, it will look up through the options that we provide to this particular form. And then it is going to do a function that is going to say if the option.id, so the ID inside of this options list, is equal to the value, which should also be the option.id, then I want to get the name of that particular row. So that is the way that we are going to be doing it and making sure that we have the name inside of the label. And like this, it should actually already work. But we can also delete this list of names which was provided previously, because we're not going to go through the list of names, but we are going to provide some options ourselves. So let's now save this. So let's enter this multi-select form also on the create page. So again, we can go to the top and we can say import the multi-select form. And then we can go a little bit further down. And next to the attendance, we can just copy over the box. But then we're going to replace the text form by our multi-select form. And the label in this case is going to be characteristics, because we want to have the characteristics of the club selected by the user. And then we can set the options equal to the data that we fetched in the last video, which was the characteristics. Actually, characteristic, it should be. So let's place that in right here. And hopefully that will all just work fine. Okay, we're now back inside of our front end, and the form is there. It doesn't look as aligned or good as the other ones, but for now, let's see if the functionality works. We do see all of the different characteristics, and if we select them, they indeed end up as the different pieces inside of here, including the name. So the logic that we've applied seems to be working fine. Let's just figure out how we can make this styling a little bit better. So back to the multi-select form.jsx. And if we now go to the return statement, we can see that we have a width which is set to 300 and a margin of 1. And we're going to be replacing that by simply a width. And that width is going to be 100%. And let's save that. And this already looks much better. So now we have this nice looking thing right here. And for now, this looks fine. So the last form that we actually need to add here is something for descriptions. Because if we go to our model.py file, that's the only field we did not really encounter yet. Now, if we go to the documentation of Material UI and we go to the text field, it also shows some of the bigger text fields further down. So you can see that we have the multi-line option, which allows you to make a bigger text field. So that is exactly what we will take to our project. So I'm going to be showing this code again and copying it over. And we're looking for the third example. And inside of the forms folder inside of the front end, I'm going to add a new one called description form.jsx. And let's just paste this and put in the function name of description form. Now we look for the third example, which is this one, which has the multi-line right here. So I'm going to get rid of everything that is below it, including the box, because we don't need that. And I can also get rid of everything that is above it. So let's also do that, including this box, so that we're only left with the multi-line field. And then we can also get rid of the box right there. Now, same thing as in the text field, actually, we want to provide a label, which is going to be this right here, so that we can determine what the actual title of that form is going to be. Now, also it has rows right here, and we can actually make that a parameter as well, so that we can determine form by form what should be the level of rows. So I'm also going to set rows as a parameter and make sure that that is also linked to rows right there. We also see a default value, but we don't actually want that at the moment. So I'm going to get rid of that right there. And let's now save this. Now we can go to the create page again, and then in there import the last form that we need for this video. And that is the description form. And we can then place that one on the bottom here next to the multi-select form. And we're going to get a description form as the actual form. We can get rid of the options because we don't have any options. And we can set the label to description. And actually, good point. We also need to add the rows. So for rows, for now, I'm going to keep that on 9. And let's see what happens if I save that. And now you can see that it's already much bigger than it was before. Same as the other situations though, we see that the width is not completely fine. So we're gonna go to the form again, to the description form, and add some sx, 2 times those parentheses, and we set a width equal to 100%. And that should do the trick. And indeed, it is now looking like this. Now that makes our project look like this. Now, what if you would like to have the description form right here and the form structured a little bit in a different way around it? Well, the only way to really do that is to not have these things overload with grep, but actually put them in different sections like this, this, and this. And to provide you an example of what that could look like, is we can just use one form area and put multiple forms inside there. So if I would now put the text form for city also in the first form area, and we can just get rid of the other form area, and then we can also put the select form for league in there, you would see that they're all going to be in the same column. So let's save that one as well. And if we now go back to our front end, you can see that they're actually now like this. So we can also do that for the other ones so that we can have the description nicely over there. So we can have a second form area after this initial one. That one contains the league and also the country. So let's just get rid of that initial form area like this. And also the text form for the attendance can go like so. And we can even do the same thing for the last one, where we have the form area, where we have the characteristics. And then from the second one, we obviously need to get rid of league because we already had that in the first setup. And we can add the characteristics to there as well. And let's fix those indentations here. And we can also get rid of this form area. So let's say that. And now it's organized in a little bit of a different way. And we can add some spacing to these forms right here by doing a margin to the top. So to do that, we can actually add another box around this specific form. And in there, we can only add some styling by doing sx is equal to, and then do a margin top that is going to be equal to 30 pixels. And then place the text form in there. And we can do exactly the same thing for the select form, where we can place it inside of the box. And let's also fix the indentation there. And also make sure that the box is closed correctly. And you will see that they're now spaced a little bit more evenly. And then we do exactly the same thing for the other ones that we have here. So we have the select form again, which is fine because that's the top one. And we can simply add something in here for the text form of the attendance. And we can do the same thing then for the multi-select form. So this is a little bit of a different way to think about how you are going to be placing your forms inside of your front-end UI. And I'm just going to leave it like this because for now that is all fine. And I like having the big box of the description all the way on the right. So let's now save this and go to the page. And that seems to be looking just fine for now. Only thing that we're missing for when we're going to actually work with this is a submit button. Now, luckily, we also have that right here. So if we go to the section here, we have buttons, and we can just have one of those contained buttons in there. Now, of course, I can also make this one reusable, but I'm just going to copy over the contained version and put it in our project. And where I actually want it is below this first one, so that we have it right here, kind of as the same width. Now, to do that, we actually, in this new way of formatting, need to go to this initial form area, so the first one. And then on the bottom, we can place the button. And let's also make sure that we have that box for the 30 pixels to give it a little bit more distance. And what we also need to then make sure is that we have the import of the button correct inside of our project as well. So if we go to the button, you can see that we need to import button from M at the MUI material button. So on the top of our file, we're going to be adding that in there as well. And as a last step, let's change the text because now it just says contained. And I'm going to say submit the data. And let's save that. Now in this case, I also want this to be full width. So let's go to the code. And inside of the button, we can just add something called full width, because that's just one of the material UI parameters that we can use. And now you can see that we have a full width button. And that is actually all for this video. In this video, I showed you how you can add forms to your React.js frontend. Now, of course, at the moment, this form does not really do anything. We can add information, we can select different things, but we are not able to actually submit something because there's no logic for sending this data to the backend. And that is exactly what we will be focusing on in the next video, where we're going to be completing the full create process for creating football clubs. I want to thank you very much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please leave a like and subscribe, and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye bye.